It's fascinating, isn't it, how the Catholic Church speaks with divine certainty about things no human being could possibly know. There's a strange comfort in that confidence, an institution declaring, with full authority, what happens after death, who is forgiven, and who must burn. It's almost poetic if you ignore the centuries of suffering required to sustain such poetry. Let's begin with a question. What happens when morality is outsourced to an institution that claims to speak for God? You get a paradox, a moral monopoly pretending to sell redemption while manufacturing guilt. The Catholic Church, perhaps more than any other, perfected the art of spiritual debt, from indulgences sold like heavenly coupons to confessions whispered behind latticed screens. Salvation became a subscription model before capitalism was even invented. The early church didn't merely spread faith, it acquired territory, wealth, and fear. It convinced emperors that divine authority could flow through men, provided those men wore the right robes. And when the faithful hesitated, the church offered reminders, burning reminders, public ones. Heresy, they called it. The will of God, they said, because nothing says divine love like lighting someone on fire for disagreeing. But of course, that was the old church, wasn't it? The one we've moved past. Yet its ghosts remain everywhere, in the doctrines that insist human beings are born broken, guilty of an ancient sin they never committed, and in need of perpetual forgiveness from the very system that defined their guilt in the first place. It's a theological protection racket. The church defines the disease, then sells the cure. Take the doctrine of original sin. It's a curious belief that the moral burden of humanity began with one woman taking dietary advice from a snake. From that fable, the church built a global enterprise, convincing billions that they inherit guilt from birth. A newborn, barely breathing, is already spiritually indebted. The first bill arrives in holy water, baptism they call it, washing away a sin no one remembers committing. It's a clever business model. Start your customer base young. Then there's the concept of confession, a ritual designed to relieve guilt, but more subtly, to reinforce dependency. Imagine telling another human, often a celibate stranger in a booth, that you have sinned and that his approval determines your absolution. There's something profoundly psychological in that design. The sinner kneels, the priest listens, the church maintains control over both. It's not just forgiveness, it's surveillance disguised as mercy. Some might say confession is therapeutic, but therapy encourages self-awareness. Confession discourages it. The goal isn't to understand why you did wrong. It's to accept that wrongness as part of your fallen nature and beg to be washed clean by authority. It's not growth, it's absolution without evolution. And what of the celibate clergy? The church teaches that sexual desire is sacred only within marriage, yet demands its own representatives renounce it entirely. That contradiction would be comedic if it weren't tragic. To deny one's own humanity in service of holiness creates exactly what you'd expect. Repression, secrecy, and scandal. The institution that built its walls high to protect morality ended up breeding the very sins it condemned most loudly. But the real genius of Catholicism lies not in its theology, it lies in its psychology. It understands fear, the fear of eternal punishment, the fear of disappointing an invisible Father, the fear of thinking for yourself. And so, the church became a paternal figure for the world, punishing, forgiving, and always reminding you that your virtue depends on obedience. Historically, this authority wasn't earned, it was enforced. When Galileo dared suggest that the earth wasn't the center of the universe, the church accused him of heresy. It wasn't the stars that revolved around men, it was the church's power that revolved around ignorance. Knowledge was dangerous because it threatened monopoly over mystery, and yet, the church's strength has always been its ability to adapt its image while preserving its essence. Modern Catholicism speaks the language of compassion, of charity, of reform. But beneath the rebranding lies the same foundational idea, that human beings require spiritual supervision, that morality without divine sanction collapses, that people cannot be trusted to be good on their own. This belief is quietly insulting, isn't it? The idea that goodness must be authorized by something external, that empathy, love, and justice don't exist unless stamped by heaven. It reduces the noblest parts of humanity to borrowed virtues. The church has always excelled at disguising control as care. Consider how confession, obedience, and submission are painted as acts of humility, when in reality, they are mechanisms to suppress doubt. To doubt the church is to doubt God, and to doubt God is to endanger your soul. This circular reasoning ensures the faithful stay within the pen, even as they call it pasture. It's no coincidence that Catholic architecture mirrors its theology. Step inside a grand cathedral, towering ceilings, dim light, colored glass filtering divine stories. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also strategic. You feel small beneath those arches. The scale is meant to humble you, to remind you of your insignificance. It's not just worship, it's design psychology. The building itself preaches the sermon. You are tiny, we are vast. Kneel accordingly. The contradictions pile higher than the domes of the Vatican. A church that preaches poverty yet drips in gold. A hierarchy that speaks of equality under God but reserves power for men in robes. A system that condemns greed yet collects donations in golden plates. And the irony? Those who point out these contradictions are accused of cynicism, as though noticing hypocrisy were a moral flaw. There's something profoundly theatrical about Catholicism. Every ritual, every robe, every word echoes like a script written for eternity. The incense rises, the bells chime, and the faithful kneel on cue. It's performance art with moral consequences. The Church calls it liturgy. Psychologists might call it conditioning. This choreography of belief works because it appeals to the senses before it reaches the mind. The soft glow of candles, the velvet solemnity of Latin, the rhythmic confession of, through my fault, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. The faithful internalize guilt, not as an occasional feeling, but as a fundamental truth about their existence. And guilt, when institutionalized, is the most reliable instrument of obedience ever invented. The Church didn't just inherit sin, it monetized it. The sale of indulgences during the Middle Ages is often dismissed as a historical footnote, but it was a masterclass in manipulating fear. Pay a priest, shorten your sentence in purgatory. Spiritual extortion wrapped in theology. Imagine the audacity of claiming to reduce your suffering in the afterlife for a price. Not even modern subscription services are that confident. And yet, the deeper irony is that the system worked because people wanted to believe. They didn't buy indulgences because they were gullible. They bought them because the alternative, eternal torment, was too unbearable to contemplate. Fear doesn't demand logic, it demands relief. And the Church was generous enough to sell it. That same pattern repeats today in more subtle ways. The modern Church, polished and politically cautious, doesn't sell indulgences anymore. It sells narratives, stories of moral superiority, divine order, and eternal purpose. And people still buy them, not with coins, but with silence. The faithful overlook scandal, abuse, corruption, because to question the shepherd feels like betraying the flock. One of the Church's most fascinating contradictions is its relationship with power. It preaches humility, but sits at the right hand of emperors and presidents. It condemns worldliness, but operates as one of the largest property owners on the planet. The Vatican is not just a holy city. It's a sovereign state with its own bank, diplomats, and intelligence network. A spiritual corporation that doesn't pay taxes yet demands moral authority over those who do. And let's talk about authority. The idea that the Pope is infallible when speaking ex cathedra, that is, from the chair of St. Peter, is an extraordinary claim. A man in white robes, elected by other men in robes, becomes incapable of error in matters of faith and morals. If that sounds absurd, that's because it is. No human mind becomes divine simply because a council voted on it. It's democracy trying to impersonate divinity. But infallibility is only one part of the illusion. The greater trick is how the Church defines doubt as sin. To question the dogma is to risk your soul. It's a self-sealing system. The cure for doubt is obedience, and the punishment for disobedience is eternal suffering. That's not faith, it's intellectual colonization. This mechanism extends beyond